Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Donkey Projections. I'm Lucas, and unfortunately Eric couldn't make it today, but he'll be back as soon as possible. But today I'll be taking a look at the 2022 Senate and be making our predictions for those elections. It is important to note that we are still very far away from those elections, but I'll still be making my predictions for them. And with that being said, let's get right into it. So usual suspects, we're going to go down the safe seats. Not New Hampshire. We have lots to discuss about New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, Maryland. There is some talk about potentially Larry Hogan running, but he has no chance of winning. I believe that's actually it for the Democratic states. Illinois. Okay. Now Republican states, you've got Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, I'll give safe, Arkansas, Louisiana, Kentucky, Indiana, Alabama, South Carolina, and I believe that should be it. And Missouri. Actually, I'll leave Missouri off. So let's start by looking at the likely states, starting with the likely Democratic states. First is Colorado. Michael Bennet is here. He is a pretty well-known figure. He ran for president in 2020, although it was quite a short run. However, we're going to be going with likely on this one because of Colorado's trend left. It voted 13.5 points to Biden in 2020. A lot of the Denver area, a lot of the metropolitan areas are moving further and further to the left to the point where Colorado is basically no longer competitive. And I actually, hot take, but I do believe that Colorado will be voting to the left of New Mexico in 2024. So that one's likely. Another likely state that I kept off was Missouri. Missouri, this is because of potentially Jay Nixon running or another strong Democratic candidate to run against the senator that, or rather, former Governor Greitens that's running for the seat. He's quite unpopular. He's got a bunch of scandals behind him. The current senator here is Roy Blunt, but he is retiring, which leaves an open seat that the Republicans are likely to hold. But given that Eric Greitens is a very unpopular guy, potentially it could end up flipping. Again, the chance of that is very, very low, so it's likely 5 to 15 points. Another likely Republican state is the state of Alaska. This is currently held by Lisa Murkowski. I don't think she announced whether she would be running yet. However, she already has an opponent in Kelly Tshibaka, I believe. And Alaska now has ranked choice voting, which means that technically Lisa Murkowski cannot get primaried. Now, I do believe Lisa Murkowski will still win, although very narrowly. It depends on how many Democratic votes she's able to get. It's going to be a close race, but it's probably going to be over, 10 points, whether it be Al Gross or another Democrat that's running here. So that one's likely Republican. Another likely Republican state is the state of Ohio. Now, Democrats are running good candidates, around the country. Ohio is one of those examples. However, unfortunately for them, it's way too red now. Maybe I shouldn't say way too red, but it is trending more and more to the left. It has moved to now voting for Biden by 8, voting for Trump by 8 points in 2020 because of those rural areas shifting more and more to the right. So Democrats recruited Tim Ryan to run for the Senate seat that's currently open. He's going to be against probably Josh Mandel, I would say. But he's going to probably end up losing between 5 to 15 points. Another state that, I realized Iowa here. I did want to briefly discuss this. If Chuck Grassley is running, which I do believe he is, this is absolutely safe. Chuck Grassley wins by like 30 points every time he runs. However, there is an emerging Democratic opponent, Abby Finkenauer, who announced she would be running. She's the former congresswoman here who ended up losing in 2020 in a pretty big upset. So she could have potentially a chance to win against probably anyone other than Chuck Grassley, although it is a very, very low chance given how red Iowa's become, those rural areas. For now, we're going to keep it as safe, assuming that Chuck Grassley does run again for re-election. The state of Florida, as I mentioned before, Democrats are fielding really good candidates: Finkenhauer, Tim Ryan, Fetterman, Mandela Barnes. The problem with Florida is, again, Marco Rubio does perform quite well every time the Miami-Dade area. He ends up losing it, but not losing it by too much. Val Demings is a pretty good candidate, a pretty well-known name. She actually was considered for vice president actually a year from this year. I remember making videos about her regarding who we think Biden's going to choose. So I do think Florida is going to end up going in a lean. Now, I think we might have had this one as likely before, but I do believe it's going to be less than 5 points, but like it's literally going to be on the cusp of 5 points, like 4 to 5 points. I don't think Val Demings will be able to defeat Marco Rubio here. And also considering Florida has moved to the right, actually, decently, voting for Trump by 3.6. So this will be interesting to watch, but we're going to keep it as lean for now. Now for the lean Democratic states. First of all is Nevada. So Adam Laxalt, I believe he's the current Attorney General of Nevada. Yes, he's running for the seat. Quite frankly, I don't think he'll beat Catherine Cortez Masto. The only candidate that I believe that can beat Catherine Cortez Masto, as we mentioned, is Brian Sandoval, the former Republican and very popular governor of the state, very moderate guy. However, Adam Laxalt, I believe he has aligned himself way too closely to Donald Trump in order to win this Senate seat. And also, I do understand that some people are saying, Clark County is trending to the right, and Nevada, we thought that Biden would win it in a likely margin. He ends up winning it in a much narrower margin than anyone expected. I won't say anyone, but than we expected for sure. I still think Catherine Cortez Masto is popular enough to hold on to this seat. And it leads us to Arizona. Narrowly went to Biden in 2020. Mark Kelly, again, a pretty good candidate, lots of name recognition, former astronaut, current senator. He is pretty popular among Democrats and, mildly popular among Republicans. Mildly might not be, it might be pushing because he is, still obviously underwater by a lot. And Republicans, I think they're running, oh gosh, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Brnovich. Someone correct me in the comments, but I believe his name's Mark Brnovich. He's the current Attorney General of Arizona. He actually is trying to distance himself a little bit away from Trump. I don't think he really mentioned him that much in his ads. Again, someone correct me on that. Oh, wait, actually, no. He might have mentioned him a lot in his ads, but he wasn't, promoting those election fraud comments too badly. So perhaps he could connect better with voters in Arizona, but I still believe that Mark Kelly is going to be popular enough and also well-known enough to hold on to the seat, probably in a lean margin. And that's what I'm thinking for this state. Again, it's very early, so making a lot of assumptions here. So I want to talk about New Hampshire now, because New Hampshire is interesting. Again, we're all waiting on Sununu on whether or not he's been running. I saw his recent interview. He is saying, I might decide in fall and next winter. So we really don't know yet. I actually thought about this race a lot. Initially, I was going to put this one as lean R if he did announce he was running, but I'm actually a lot less bullish on Sununu winning if he were to go against Hassan. Now, thinking about how the nationalization of a lot of these the nationalization of these national issues could end up hurting Sununu, because New Hampshire still went to Joe Biden by around 7 to 8 points in 2020, and potentially that could hurt him by forcing him to give a stance on some of his issues. Of course, he won by 30 points in 2020. However, again, state issues are very, very different from national issues, or national elections, I should say. So for now, it's going to be probably likely D. This is under the scenario, and I'll repeat it again. This is under the case that Sununu does not run. If Sununu does run, this will go to tilt R. Again, I believe that he's the narrow favorite, but I don't believe he's going to 100%. He's the clear winner in this race. Heading on to Georgia now. So this is Raphael Warnock. He's likely to go up against Herschel Walker. I don't really think Herschel Walker is too great of a candidate. A lot of people are referring to him as a carpetbagger because he is kind of from Texas. Uh, he's a very Trumpy guy. I want to see how he runs this campaign. I'm curious because if he runs a very Kelly Loeffler like campaign, that's going to turn off a lot of voters. As we saw, Kelly Loeffler, the suburbs completely diverted away from her in the runoff election, which ultimately led to Raphael Warnock winning the seat in the 2021 runoff earlier this year. So, we didn't see his campaign too much yet, but I'm expecting him to run pretty pro-Trumpy, considering that he is pretty close friends with the former president. So I'm going to be giving this race lean D. I was between lean and tilt, probably going to be somewhere between lean and tilt. Haven't really decided on that yet. But I'm putting this one as lean D, considering Raphael Warnock is still pretty well known. He has enough name recognition. And again, this is a race that we'll be watching because we're not secure on this one either. Heading to North Carolina now, it looks like now Sherry Beasley, who is the former Supreme Court Justice, is going to be now running for this seat. Initially, we did have this one as lean R, but after carefully considering this, under the scenario that Pat McCrory is the Republican nominee for the seat, he'd be a terrible candidate. Now, I do want to say that it is looking a little bit unlikely now that Pat McCrory is going to become the nominee due to the fact that Donald Trump endorsed former Representative Ted Budd. And, Trump has a lot of influence on these primaries now. But I do want to mention that, I'm recording this on at 11 p.m. Eastern time on the July 27th. And the race between Jake Eltsey and Susan Wright just got called. And we saw Jake Eltsey defeat Susan Wright, even though she was endorsed by former President Trump. So potentially we could be seeing some pattern, but the main difference is, and I think it's worth mentioning, is Democrats probably swung to Jake Eltsey that election. North Carolina Republican primary, it's just going to be Pat McCrory, with all the Republicans voting. So under the scenario that Pat McCrory does win the Republican primary and Sherry Beasley goes up against him, I think this is actually toss up to tilt R because Sherry Beasley is a pretty good candidate. She has won national races before, came very, very close to winning in 2020, like super close, only a couple hundred votes off. And this is in a state where Biden lost it by 1.8 points. So I'm thinking tilt R. But even with perhaps another candidate like Ted Budd, Sherry Beasley could still end up bringing the margin down enough to be between, would be in our tilt range. So we are moving this one to tilt R. And we now have Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Regarding Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, as I mentioned, the former lieutenant governor, the current lieutenant governor of the state, very populist guy, running on a pretty progressive record, actually. He is considered more of a far left I don't want to say far left, but more of a progressive candidate. I believe he supported Bernie Sanders in 2020, yes. But he probably is going to be winning the Democratic primary here. And ultimately, I do think he would be able to defeat the Republican nominee if it really is Sean Parnell. I think Sean Parnell's really not a great candidate. He is, probably going to line himself a lot with Donald Trump. And what we saw in Pennsylvania in 2020 was the suburbs kind of going away from Trump and going towards Biden, especially the Philadelphia suburbs. That's why Joe Biden won Pennsylvania. All those suburbs swung way to the left. And I believe the same thing will be happening if Sean Parnell is the nominee and he's up against John Fetterman, a very good candidate. So we're going to be going with tilt D, but debatably we could be moving this also to lean D. And finally, the state of Wisconsin. I know you guys all want a response of what our rating is to this because we haven't touched this in a while. Again, we have no clue on whether Ron Johnson's running yet. Ron Johnson, current senator, very, very pro-Trump. He tends to do very well in the state of Wisconsin. However, he's been giving mixed signals. As we mentioned in our video that I made with Eric a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, he raised a ton of money, but he's saying, I don't know if I'm the best candidate or not. So What has changed in the past few weeks is that there's a new candidate here, Mandela Barnes. The past, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Sarah Godlewski becoming the nominee, potentially defeating Ron Johnson. Godlewski is no longer probably going to be the nominee. It is very likely that Mandela Barnes, who is the current lieutenant governor of Wisconsin, wow, this is the year of lieutenant governor, current lieutenant governor of the state of Wisconsin, is likely to defeat Sarah Godlewski in the primary. Now, I personally do believe that Barnes will do better than Godlewski statewide. He's very well known. But I have heard the argument, UEP has been talking about it, how potentially Godlewski has won statewide before, and, she's probably the best candidate to put against someone like Ron Johnson or a Republican. I think Mandela Barnes is better than that. So I'm going to be going, again, with a toss-up still. It's still way too hard to tell. And we're also very, very early in election season. So we've got to wait for some more polls, some more fundraising numbers, and potentially some more trends. But Wisconsin is a very interesting state because it is quite rural in some areas. It is the more conservative state in the Rust Belt. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening in this state. And we'll update you with the Moody prediction as soon as we can, as well as we get more information on the state. We'll probably be investigating Wisconsin in depth in the future. And with that being said, that is the end of the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this episode, please hit the like button. If you like our content, please subscribe. And we'll see you in our next episode tomorrow. See ya.